The law offices of Henderson, Blackwood Associates smelled like old leather and older money. I sat in the waiting room studying the oil paintings of stern-faced partners while my stepmother Diane held court with her children Brandon and Chloe, planning their spending sprees in whispered excitement. "First thing I'm doing is buying that yacht," Brandon announced, scrolling through his phone the 60-footer we looked at in Miami. "I'm thinking a house in the Hamptons," Chloe added, flipping her bleached hair. "Something tasteful, maybe 8 bedrooms. Diane patted their hands with her perfectly manicured nails, the same nails that had been digging into my father's fortune for the past 7 years. "Children, let's not be gauche. We'll discuss investments after we handle the formalities," Diane stage whispered. She shot me a venomous look across the waiting room. I pretended to be absorbed in emails on my phone, though I don't know why she even bothered showing up. "Harold made his wishes very clear before he died." Harold, she couldn't even call him my father. Just then the receptionist appeared. "Mr. Blackwood will see you all now." We filed into the conference room where James Blackwood waited, my father's will folder spread before him. He was trying very hard to maintain his professional composure, but something around his eyes suggested he was fighting back. "Amusement, please everyone, have a seat," he said, gesturing to the chairs. "Can I offer anyone water? Coffee? This might take a while, let's just get this over with," Diane said, briskly settling into what she clearly thought was the power position at the table. "I have a meeting with my financial advisor at 3. Of course, Mr. Blackwood opened the folder. "First, let me express my condolences on the loss of Harold Morrison. He was a client for over 30 years and yes, very sad." Diane interrupted, "Now about the estate division." "Mr. Blackwood's," I twitched slightly. "Indeed. Let's begin with the reading of Mr. Morrison's last will and testament dated, let me see, 5 years ago." "5 years?" I asked quietly. "Wasn't it updated more recently?" Diane's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. "Oh sweetie, you really don't understand how these things work, do you? Harold and I revised everything after our wedding, made sure the estate stayed in the immediate family." "The immediate family," I repeated. Meaning the people who actually cared for him in his final years. Diane said sweetly, "Not the daughter who barely visited, too busy with her little non-profit job to spend time with her father." I thought about all the visits she'd mysteriously scheduled during her hair appointments, the family dinners she'd forgotten to tell me about, the time she'd told my father I was too busy when he'd asked about me. "Shall we proceed?" Mr. Blackwood asked. And again that strange glimmer of suppressed mirth. "Please do," Diane said. "I believe you'll find everything is quite straightforward. The estate is divided between myself and my children with a small token left to charity. As for Andrea, here, she gets nothing," Diane announced triumphantly, unable to contain herself any longer. "I made sure of it. 7 years of marriage and I finally got Harold to see sense about his ungrateful daughter." "You're not in the will, Andrea." "Not 1 penny." The room fell silent. Brandon and Chloe were grinning like sharks who'd scented blood. Diane looked like a cat who'd swallowed an entire aviary. That's when Mr. Blackwood started laughing. Not a chuckle, not a professional clearing of the throat. A full, genuine laugh that echoed off the mahogany panels. "I'm sorry," he said, wiping his eyes. "That was unprofessional. It's just Mrs. Morrison. Do you know what a revocable living trust is?" Diane's triumphant expression flickered. "Of course I do. It's a financial instrument." "Very good," Mr. Blackwood said, still fighting back chuckles. "And do you know when Harold established his children's trust?" "Children?" Diane snapped. "He only had 1 child. Her." "Actually," Mr. Blackwood pulled out another folder, this one much thicker. "Harold established the Morrison Family Trust 28 years ago when Andrea was 10. It's been growing ever since." So Diane's voice was losing its confidence. "He revoked it. When we updated the will." "Did he?" Mr. Blackwood pulled out a document, "because I have here the trust documents including all amendments. The last one was made 13 months ago. You know what's interesting about trusts, Mrs. Morrison?" Diane said nothing, her face beginning to pale under her expensive foundation. "They're completely separate from wills," Mr. Blackwood continued. "In this case the trust was structured to transfer all assets to Andrea on either her 38th birthday or upon Harold's death, whichever came first." "That's impossible," Diane whispered. "Andrea." Mr. Blackwood turned to me. "When was your birthday?" 14 months ago, I said quietly. "Dad threw me a party." A small one. Diane was at a spa weekend. A yes. Mr. Blackwood confirmed the weekend's events. Harold had visited him, being very precise about the timing. Harold's intention was to ensure a clean transfer before any potential complications. Mr. Blackwood then addressed Diane, stating that a trust that had already transferred $50 million last year could not be altered. Diane's face paled dramatically, her mouth agape like a gasping fish. Brandon's voice broke as he echoed $50 million? Mr. Blackwood corrected him, explaining that the $50 million was the valuation 14 months prior. With market performance and dividend reinvestments, the trust was now valued at approximately $57 million. Chloe shrieked, but the houses, the cars, the bank accounts, all held by the trust? Mr. Blackwood explained patiently, which transferred to Andrea last year. You've been living in Andrea's houses, driving Andrea's cars and spending Andrea's money for the past 14 months. I finally spoke. Dad told me to wait. Said it would be better to let everything play out naturally. He wanted to see if you'd change, Diane, if you'd stop being, so I searched for the word inquisitive. This is fraud. Diane spat. Well, Sue, Harold wasn't in his right mind. Actually, Mr. Blackwood pulled out a medical report. Harold had a comprehensive cognitive evaluation 13 months ago, perfect scores across the board. He also had 3 psychiatrists confirm his mental capacity. He was, and I quote, sharp as a tack and twice as pointed, his words, not mine. But why? Brandon asked, looking genuinely confused. Why would he do this? I looked at him with something almost like pity, because he saw what you were doing, all of you, the credit cards you took out in his name, Brandon, the jewelry you bought and charged to his accounts, Chloe and you, Diane. I turned to my stepmother, the systematic isolation from his friends and family. The medication mix-ups that kept him foggy, the way you moved your mother into the guest house. Without asking, you can't prove any of that. Diane hissed, I don't have to. I said Dad already did. He hired a private investigator 2 years ago. Would you like to see the reports? Mr. Blackwood produced another folder thick with photographs and documents. Harold was particularly interested in your first marriage. Mrs. Morrison. How did your first husband die again? Medication mix-up, wasn't it? The silence in the room was deafening. Now Mr. Blackwood continued briskly. Let's discuss the actual will. It's quite simple. To my beloved wife Diane Morrison, I leave the sum of $1, the amount she truly deserves, to Brandon and Chloe Whitfield. I leave the remainder of my estate consisting mainly of personal effects. Since the trust already transferred, all assets goes to Andrea. He pulled out 3 $1 bills and placed them on the table. That's it. Chloe whispered, $1. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse. I have something for each of you. I pulled out 3 envelopes. Eviction notices. You have 30 days to vacate my properties. All of them. You can't evict us. Diane stood up so fast, or chair tipped over. I'm his widow. You're a tenant. I corrected, living rent-free in my house. Well, houses the main estate, the beach house, the mountain cabin, and whatever apartment Brandon's been keeping in the city. How did you? Brandon started the same way. Dad knew about your gambling debts. I said, and Chloe's shopping addiction and Diane's interesting investment history. You weren't nearly as clever as you thought. Mr. Blackwood cleared his throat. There is one more matter. Harold's letter to be read. After the will, he pulled out an envelope and handed it to me. He insisted you read it aloud. I opened it. Recognizing my father's handwriting. My dearest Andrea, if you're reading this, then our plan worked perfectly. I'm sorry for the deception, but I needed to know who Diane really was, and I needed you protected while I found out you were right to be suspicious. When I remarried so quickly after your mother's death, your instincts have always been excellent. What you didn't know was that I was already sick. The cancer diagnosis came just weeks after the wedding. I thought Diane would care for me, but instead she revealed her true nature. Thank you for trusting me when I asked you to play along. Thank you for pretending to be pushed aside while I moved assets into the trust. Thank you for letting them think they'd won. While we secured your future to Diane, Brandon, and Chloe, I know exactly what you are. The investigators' reports are with the district attorney, who promised to review them after my death. I suggest you use your 30 days notice wisely. Andrea, my daughter, you are everything I could have hoped for. Strong, patient, intelligent, and above all good. Take care of the fortune I've left you, but more importantly, take care of yourself. All my love, Dad. P.S. Your mother's engagement ring is in my desk drawer. Second on the left. I hid it when Diane started eyeing it. It's yours now, as she always intended. By the time I finished reading, Diane had collapsed back into her chair. Brandon was frantically texting, probably his bookie. Chloe was crying, mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks. Is there anything else? Diane asked Mr. Blackwood, her voice barely a whisper. Just this, he said, pulling out one more document. A restraining order. Andrea filed it this morning. You're to have no contact with her after you vacate the properties. Any attempt to contest the trust or will shall result in immediate enforcement. You planned this, Diane said, staring at me. You both planned this. Dad planned it, I corrected. I just followed his lead, just like you followed the same playbook you used on your first husband. Oh, did you think Dad didn't know about Charles? About the insurance policy? About the medication you gave him? That was never proven, Diane said quickly. No, I agreed. But it's interesting how history repeats itself, or would have if Dad hadn't been smarter than you gave him credit for. I stood gathering my copies of the documents. Mr. Blackwood, thank you for everything, for helping my father protect what mattered most to him. My pleasure, he said, still fighting back a smile. Your father was a brilliant man. This was the most elegant estate planning I've ever seen. As I reached the door, Diane called out. Andrea, please. I was his wife. Doesn't that count for something? I turned back. It counts for exactly what you put into the marriage: lies, manipulation, and greed. Dad figured out your true value, Diane. He was generous. I wouldn't have given you that much. I left them there sitting in their shock, staring at their dollar bills in the parking lot. I sat in my car, not the trust's anymore, actually mine, and let out a breath I'd been holding for 14 months. My phone rang. Sharon, Dad's nurse, the only one Diane couldn't manage to fire. How did it go? She asked. Exactly as Dad predicted, I said, down to Diane's demand for proof. He'd be so proud, Sharon said softly. He talked about you constantly. Those last weeks said you were the only person who never wanted anything from him but his time. I miss him, I admitted. I know, honey, but he made sure you'd be okay. In the end, his only concern was your protection. The bonus of punishing them was secondary. After our call, I drove to the cemetery. Dad's grave was adorned with fresh flowers, though I'd been visiting weekly despite Diane's claims that I never did. We did it, Dad, I whispered to the headstone, just as you planned. They never anticipated it. The wind rustled the trees, and for a fleeting moment I could almost hear his laugh, the same laugh he'd had 14 months ago in Mr. Blackwood's office when we signed papers while Diane was at the spa. She thinks she's so clever, he'd said then, but clever and smart are not the same. You're smart, Andrea. You know the difference between taking care of someone and taking them for everything they have. I placed a single rose on his grave, his favorite, the coral ones from Mom's garden that I still maintained, and headed home, not to the estate where Diane was probably frantically packing, but to the small house Dad had secretly bought in my name years ago, the one where I'd been living quietly, letting them think I was struggling while the trust accumulated wealth. Dad was right. Clever and smart weren't the same thing. Diane was clever,